Hi, this is DarkFox127 and welcome to another Scrum Creation Kit tutorial video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my latest version of my crafting system. So if you're not sure what that means, it's essentially the crafting system that you have in Hearthfire where you build up your home, creating maybe the structure, the objects inside of it, and picking and choosing whatever you want. I've got my own similar system that I've been developing over the past 6 years or so, and it's pretty much gotten to a stage that I'm quite happy to do an updated video on it. It's very efficient, it's very easy for modders to implement, and it's also very easy for players to understand without sort of ruining any of their immersion. So in this video I'm going to be covering the new crafting system. What we'll do is go in and I'll show exactly how to put it all together, and then I'll have a section of this video which you can skip if you so wish that will cover the actual script itself, how it works, but you don't really have to have an understanding to use it. You can just pick it up and run with it. Now, a couple of things to note are that I'm going to be using Hearthfire with this. I've created this house, built it in about 15 minutes or so, just a real quick exterior and interior. We're going to put a workbench outside. So I'm using Hearthfire ESM just to get the workbench and also utilize the keywords, which is good in the menu for filtering things out. It's not really essential, but it is something that it's worth using really, because you get the nice workbench from Hearthfire. Also, SKSE is essential with this version. There are very important functions of this crafting system that will require SKSE. So I do have a video that I'll put at the top of the screen for installing SKSE, but you will also need to make sure that you can compile scripts for SKSE. And what that means is if you do want to make any changes to this script, to use it you shouldn't need it, but if you want to edit it, you'll need SKSE either loose in your data folder, or if you're loading up with something like Mod Organizer, it will need to load Creation Kit through Mod Organizer with SKSE installed and the source code available to recompile and use SKSE functions, again, if you want to mess with it. So with all that out of the way, let's dive in and let's get started. The first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is find the workbench. So I'm going to type workbench in the filter, make sure that I'm under static, is it? No, it's not, world objects and furniture, and then at the very top should be the build your own house carpenter's workbench. And I'm just going to drag that straight into the render window, spin it around and put it in place. Now obviously we're going to rename this, make a different version of it, because we don't want to edit Hearthfires, that would be bad. So I'm going to double click on it, I'm going to click on edit the base and change the ID before anything else. So I'm going to do DF workbench and I'm going to click OK, create new form, yes. And the reason I'm doing that before I do anything else or make any changes is because sometimes when you go ahead and make changes before you've confirmed a new version of the thing you're editing, it will wipe out the changes. So it's good just to get a new version of it and then go back into it to make the tweaks you want. So I'm going to change the name just for funsies, and it's going to be called Dark's Workbench. You can call it whatever you like. We've already got the model because we've made a copy, so we don't have to search through vanilla files or anything and knowing the file path. You don't need a marker model. You've got the various tags up here that do different things. A notable one is that children can use it. If you do that, then using the keyword rated to scale, if kids hop on the workbench, they'll probably grow into it and turn into adults for a moment, and it's going to look very strange. So don't tick child can use with a workbench. The other thing to note is marker. Is marker means that it won't be visible, but the marker can be activated. So it'll be there in an activatable sense in game, but you won't see the workbench. This is very useful if you would like to create your own workbench with different bits in the kit, and then just use this furniture piece to activate that workbench. So it's good to building it into like a workspace, like a workshop or something if you wanted to do that. So it's really good for creative reasons. Now the keywords are also interesting. The top one here for build your own home, building carpenter, we're going to delete and we're going to replace it with our own one. And what our new keyword does, I'm just going to give it a colour for funsies, don't think it really does too much. The reason that we use a keyword here, a custom one, is because the keyword will link with the constructible objects, which we'll see shortly, that determine what piece of furniture allows you to craft our objects. So the keyword is going to define its workbench essentially. Keyword and we'll put craft. Just use a craft keyword. That'll annoy me if that's uppercase. There we go. So new keyword in there, df keyword craft, and we'll go back and use that very shortly. So don't worry about that just yet. Some of these you can probably delete. I don't think carpenter table is needed, but if you delete it and things break, obviously it was. They do different things. So force third person is pretty obvious. Furniture special might have a link with like packaging, package stuff, AI packages. Is blacksmith workbench does something I can't quite remember, and the race to scale, like I said, links with NPCs. If they're a bit bigger or smaller than the standard scale, they'll sort of shrink and grow into it and whatnot. The workbench data has alchemy, alchemy experiment, create object, enchanting. As you may have guessed, this essentially changes what the menu is for crafting things. In this case, we just want create object because they're going to just be normal objects that we craft. Uses skill, you could change this to smithing, which I like to do, so that you're actually getting a bit of a skill level for crafting this stuff as well. The script we don't need, we can remove that. We're not using that, we're using our own system. And that should be just about it. No need to mess with markers or any associated spells or anything like that. So we're going to click OK and OK again. And with that done, I think the best step next is to leave the workbench alone for a moment, and we'll go inside of our house. And let's have a look at the sort of things that we actually want to craft. So we've got a bed over here, we've got a bedside table with various objects on it, and we also have a few rugs around. We've got a sort of candle set in the corner. This is where you really need to decide how detailed you'd want your crafting system to be. Do you want people to have to craft every single individual item? The bed, the bedside table, every individual rug if you wanted, the candles. How crazy do you want to go? Or do you want to try and craft everything as like a room? So alchemy room, and everything in the alchemy room really sort of linked together. I tend to go somewhere in between. So if you craft the bed, you'll tend to get a bedside table with it and some objects and a bit of decoration on the walls. It really comes down to your personal preference, how you want your system to work. And this is all very modular in the sense that you can pretty much do what you want to do with it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have the bed and the bedside table separate in this instance, just because it's good for what I'm going to show you. And then we'll leave everything else. So I'm not going to go ahead and just make an entire house craftable in this video. That'd be silly. I'm just going to show you the basics of how it works, and then you can go wild with your own mod. So we've got a couple of options here. We could use an X marker, which is a really good thing to go to that everything links into. Or if you're enabling a single object, for example, like the bed, you could give it a reference, which is a good idea to do, because if ever you're selecting things in here and you're not sure if you selected the right thing and you accidentally select an effect from the window or something, like a dust effect or anything, it's good to make sure that you've got a reference so that when you do select things, you can see if you've got the right thing selected. So in this case, there's just the bed on its own. There's not really anything that comes with it. If there are a lot of items to do with the bed, then I would link it probably to an X marker. So for the bed, we'll have it as just a bed. We've given it a reference. We'll do initially disabled, so the bed's not there to begin with, and then we'll be able to craft that. And then for the bedside table, because there are a number of different objects, what I'm going to do is just grab an X marker, which will have everything linked to it. So if I go under World Objects and Static, drag in an X marker, sort of floor that. Again, give that a reference. My X marker's doing RS because of Riverside Shack. So DFX, I reckon I just did the same for the bed, didn't I? No, I did use DF, that's fine. So DFX for X marker I like to use. I don't know why. You can name these whatever you like. And then I'm just going to put bedside table. And again, that T needs to be capitalized. That'll annoy me. And then initially disabled for the marker. And what we need to do is link all of these objects to that marker. And then all we have to do is enable one marker and everything else will appear with it. So what we'll do is double click on the bedside table first. That's the main part. And you can do enable parent, select reference in render window, click on that, double click on your marker, hit OK, and that will essentially copy the state of the X marker. So when the X marker is disabled, these will be disabled. When the X marker is enabled, these will appear with it. What you can do is if you want something opposite to something else, so if one thing is there and then another thing can't be, you can do set enable state to opposite of parent, which we don't want to do in this state. So you may have a broken down building, and then you've got the restored buildings. The restored building would be enable parented to a marker, and then the broken down parts of the building would be set to opposite. So when you enable the new building, the old one would disappear, is a good example. Now, because we've got other pieces on here, I don't really want to click on every single one of these and do select reference in render window. It's going to take me a while. So we've got a candle light here. I want to make sure that anything marker wise, like the candle light, like the books, is visible. It could be hidden, and then I've forgotten that I've placed something on there, and I go ahead and link these. Make sure your markers are on, tap M on the keyboard, and then just select. So hold down Control and click on everything on here that you need to link to this marker. Now, this bulb is in the way. I'm going to click on it because I'll need that as well. But then I'm going to hit M. Everything's still selected. You can see the outlines of them. Hold Control again, and then I'm going to click on that thing. It's just a nice little trick to get to things behind markers. Hit M just to make sure I've got them all. And a nice trick to ensure that you've got what you want selected visibly. You can tap one, tap it again, and you can see that there's nothing left. Sometimes you'll notice you've left something behind, and then you can also select that. Hit one again, it'll all show. Another great thing here is the way that we're going to do this without clicking on them individually is we're going to use something called a batch menu. Now that is just the dash on the keyboard. And what that will do is bring up your reference batch action. And as you can see, it also lists here everything that you've got selected. So if you see that you've selected something you didn't want, you're going to need to deselect it in the render window. Otherwise, this looks good to me. We're going to set enable parent. You can use batch menus to do a number of different actions, which is really, really handy. So there's all sorts of stuff you can do here. You can set them all as initially disabled. You can set emittance, set ownership of this stuff. But in this case, all we need is set enable parent. So I'm just going to select the X marker there and click do. So set enable parent do, and it will do that to everything in that window, and I can close it. So all those are linked to that X marker, and what we'll do, we will set up the bed, and we will also set up the bedside table. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to have the rug appear with the bed as well. So I'm going to double click on the rug, do select reference, and that is going to copy the state of the bed as well, which is really cool. And you don't need to set enable initially disabled on objects that have an enable parent, because this wouldn't do anything. It's going to ignore this tag if it's got an enable parent. It's just going to copy the bed. So next what we need to do is go ahead and do a message. So something that you get is a message box whenever you craft something to say, are you sure you want to craft it? Yes, that's vanilla. That's normal in the game. And what we're going to do is after something's been crafted and the materials have been taken away from you, we're going to show another message box right after that says, are you sure you want to craft this particular item? Now, I would have liked to replace the initial one that shows up and change it, but that causes problems. I'm not sure that can actually be done. So I sort of put one on the end of it. So you'll get your initial confirmation of crafting, and then you'll get another one from my crafting system, and we'll see it shortly, that will ask if you're sure that you want to craft it and tell you how long it's going to take. So something I did with the old craft system is the object, as you were hovering over, told you how many hours it would take in brackets. A little bit messy and not very good for long named objects. So this will actually say, yo, this is going to take 3 hours. Are you sure? And if you hit yes, it will continue on, enable all the stuff, do all of its things, and you're good to go. Or if you say no, what it will do is give you all the objects back. So what we want to do is just set up the message box. Now, the other thing that we don't want is having multiple message boxes, where we have to have a message box for every hour that it takes. So 1 hour, 2 hour message box, 3 hour message box. What this system now does is it allows you to make a single message box and use it across all objects. So if we go under miscellaneous and message, right click and new, we can set up a new message box. Make sure that message box is ticked, should be by default. Don't need to worry about a lot of these options or even a title. And all we need to do is give it an ID to start with. So I'm going to do dfmsg craft. And then this item will take, and then what we're going to do is put a number in there for now, and I'm going to change that in a moment. We'll take 0 hours to craft. Now what we need is for this number to be different depending on the object. So what you'll do is you will type in, and make sure you do this correctly, it will be the percentage sign, dot 0 F. And what that's going to create is something that the script will recognize as a slot to put in a number that you state, and that will make sense shortly when we put it in the property. And that will essentially swap that out for whatever the number of hours that it is. Now obviously if you put 1 in there, it's not going to read very well, so just make sure everything sort of takes longer than an hour to craft. And then what you need are 2 buttons. So I'm going to right click and new for 2 different buttons. Ensure that 0 is craft or yes, whatever you want it to say. Yippee, I don't know, you can change it to whatever you want. And then number 1 in the index is going to be leave or no or refuse or give me my stuff back. Doesn't matter, whatever you want to call it. Make sure all that's correct, hit OK. Ready to go in that department. The next thing you'll need is your craft object that's going to appear on our custom workbench. So if we go under items, misc item, alt click and new, give it an ID. So I usually do df craft and we're going to do bed. So I'm going to need this bed over here as something we can see. And I'm just going to call it bed. So whatever the name is the name it's going to also be called in the crafting menu. The weight, you want to make sure you set this to 0, because otherwise what is going to happen is if you're close to having too much crap on you, then the game's going to moan at you saying you're over encumbered. Oh dear, you're not going to be able to move, and then it's going to take the stuff off. It's just going to be unimmersive and mess with things. This is going to be secretly placed into your inventory and then snuck away as soon as it's crafted. So we want to make sure it just doesn't weigh anything, it doesn't have a value or anything, it doesn't need it, don't need destruction data, don't need sounds. You will need a model. I'll come back to that. So for the keyword, we can click add, and if you've got Hearthfire loaded here, what you'll need to do is type in category, or start typing the word category. Now, although SkyUI, that a lot of people tend to use, doesn't actually make use of these keywords. If anybody is not using SkyUI or using some other sort of menu replacer that does utilize the keywords, this allows the filtering into different categories when you go in the craft menu. Unfortunately, SkyUI is a bit messy in the fact that everything's just in one big list. Really annoying. I do wish that they'd done what the original menu did and actually separated the categories out. And you can see that we have smithing, building, containers, weapon rack, shelf, furniture, exterior. And what we can do in this instance is use the category furniture. Even though you may be using SkyUI and you will never see this utilized for you, it can be utilized for the players that don't use SkyUI. So it's worth putting it in there. So we can't put a script in or anything. We've got the basics in there. I'm just going to click OK. And then I'm going to research for df craft bed under misc object. I'm going to go back into it, and you can see the script is now available and the model is also available. So putting that to one side, we essentially want this bed to be what shows in the menu. And there is something to note about this. So what we could do is just grab this model, copy it, come out of here, go to the model on here, click edit, edit under the model file name. It should go to your meshes folder. If it doesn't, you'll need to navigate to your Steam installation, your Skyrim installation. In this case, Steam Apps Common Skyrim Data is what it commonly is, and find your meshes folder. If you don't have a meshes folder, just create one. And then you'll need to go into your meshes folder, and then under file name, paste in what we copied, clutter, upperclass, upperbed 001, whatever it might be that you're crafting. Click OK, and it should find the model. Now, there may well be a problem here, and that problem is that this may not display in the crafting menu quite how you would like. On the meshes, and this is something I may well need to do a video on, there is something called a BS invisible node, something along those lines, that essentially allows you to rotate and spin and position these in the menu in terms of the zoom, their rotation. It's also for load screens and stuff, which makes sure it's in the right place. It's not going to break anything, the fact that this may not be positioned quite right, but it won't be quite as polished in the menu as you'd like to see. So you might want to see this bed in this sort of position when you view it in the menu, but it may well appear like that initially. Now the player can rotate it around and look at it, but I'll have a video on that sort of stuff going forward, a Nifscope tutorial if I don't have one already. But we're going to go ahead and use that, or a good trick is that the Hearthfire DLC does come with some of its own meshes that are similar to the stuff that you're crafting or exactly the same that you might be able to use. So this is a single bed. Let's see if we've got a double. There's a double bed, but it's noble, which is a bit of a bummer. But if you had a noble bed, for example, what I would recommend that you do is you actually take the one that's already been optimized for the crafting menu from Hearthfire. So if there's anything in Hearthfire that has the model you need, take it from Hearthfire and use that instead. But because we don't have one, we're just going to use this. And then later on, I might make a video for how we can take that object and make sure that it's rotated how you want in the load screens and in the crafting menu specifically for this. So the other thing that we need in here is a script. So I'm going to click add, and you'll need to grab this from the description. I'll have this up on my website. It'll be available to download and you can use it freely. I don't need credit, but it's always nice if I do get credit in your mod page, if you do use my systems. And then you'll create new and you do new script. No, actually we won't in this instance. What I'll do is I'll do dfcraft. It should be in here. I hope I've got it. Yeah. So dfcraft, this is the new system. I'm going to have a bit at the end of the video for this where we go and actually look at the script. But what you will need to do, you'll need to do add, new script, and you may want to go into that and copy and paste all of the lines into your own script with the exception of the top line, purely because if everybody goes ahead and uses my dfcraft script for their mods and somebody decides to make a change to it, keeping the name, it's going to potentially, depending on load order, break somebody else's mod. So make your own version of the script and then paste the lines in. So the lines that you would want, I'll just edit source in here. I usually use Sublime Text, but just for the case of this video, essentially copy everything other than the top line, put that into your own custom script, compile it, make sure you've got SKSE installed, including those source bits that I mentioned at the start of the video, and then it should compile and you'll be able to use the script. If worst comes to worst, just put my dfcraft script in and make sure you can include it in your mod at the end. That's perfectly fine, but I would recommend that you do create a new script and just copy the bits across. So what we're going to do here, we're going to put dfcraft into here. And as you can see, there's loads of easy to fill in properties. And if you hover over, I've even put tooltips. So as you hover over stuff, it will tell you what each thing does. Not necessarily all of them are needed, so it's time that we went through this. Construct object we're going to ignore because we don't have one yet, but we will have to come back to this to fill that in. And that's essentially the list of objects that are going to be used to craft it, that it will be able to give you back if you decide to pull out of the crafting of the object. Craft item is going to be itself. Now, because we've already confirmed it, it should be in here, so we'll just search for itself. I have tried doing self before in the script and it hasn't worked. It has to just state itself as a property for some reason. So this is dfcraft bed, so it matches your ID there. Because what that's going to do is as soon as this has been crafted, it's going to remove itself from the player because this is just a marker. This is just a trigger to use for the things to appear. Now you've got a disable chain and an enable chain. So if you had things that you want to have disappear when you craft something, then you can add them to this. So if you go to edit on disable chain, you will see that you can just add a bunch of references and select them in the render window. And it will run through all of these and enable and disable them. Something to note is that this does have a limit of, I believe it's 255 objects. I wouldn't recommend enabling or disabling that number of items. Wherever you can, I would use X markers with enable parenting, but the reason that this is an array is because sometimes you don't want all these objects that you're disabling linked to the same thing, so some of them are independent and you'll need to disable them independently or enable them independently, so that's why this is useful. But I would not go putting all of your objects into this because it's going to take a while, it's going to hold the script back, it's not going to be good. So link what you can to an X marker, and then if there's any other individual little bits that aren't linked with that marker that you need to get rid of, put them as separate ones in here. So you may find that whatever your system is that you're using this for, your home or whatever it might be, you're not actually needing to disable anything. If there's nothing that you need to disable, leave it blank and you can just clear value. That's fine. By default, it'll look at it and go, oh, there's nothing to disable. Now, enabling, you've most likely got stuff to enable. In this case, we've got the bed. So if I click add and pick reference in render window, double click on it, You can see also giving it that reference was helpful because we can see we have selected dfref bed, and that will enable the bed. So game hour, if you do autofill, you can do autofill all, and it will fill in the 2 or 3 that need filling in. Autofill that's essentially game hour. That is the global that is used in the game for pushing, well, for determining what the current time is in game, and it will be able to push this forward. So job time, how many hours basically do you want this to take? So the bed's going to take 3 hours to craft, I've decided. So I put 3 in, and that 3 will go into that message. Player items, if you're crafting a door, for example, that is initially locked, like your front door key to your house, and you want to add a key, then you can edit item and you can add things into here. Now you'll see that the type is a leveled item. So what you would want to do is go under leveled item, alt click new. And if there's a specific item or set of items that you want to add, even if it's a single item, just give this a reference. So leveled item and then key. And then you would add your key into there, new, select a key. So there's bound to be some sort of key or a kettle, whatever you want to add. Maybe a kettle, sod it. So a kettle here. Chance of none needs to be 0. Use all. Tick use all, and then everything in this list is going to be added to the player when you craft the object. So obviously if you craft the door and you want to add a key to them, it's extra bits that come along with the thing you've made basically. And you would confirm that and then you would add it in. I'm not going to do that because I don't think I need a kettle whenever I craft my bed. Player ref, you can autofill that one. Give it a few seconds, takes a little while sometimes, and that will fill in the player reference. And then you've got RS message craft. That shouldn't be RS. I'll change that for the final script that goes up on the resource page. But essentially you'll need to edit this and you will need to fill in that message that we created from earlier. So this is actually going to be DF message craft. And then we will leave construct object for now. We're not going to be disabling anything in this instance, nor are we going to add anything to the player when we craft it. We're going to click OK, OK again, and that's our bed done. And then if we like, we can do exactly the same thing for the bedside table. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, there we go. So I've added the bedside table as well. I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. So we've got our progress. It's not going to crash or anything, hopefully. So we've got those 2 craft objects set up now. And the next thing that we need is a constructible object for them. So this is going to get them linked to the workbench itself. So the way that I do that is go under items, constructible object, and alt click and new. Give that a second. It can take a little while for certain things to load. And I'm going to give it an ID of df construct, and we are going to do the bed first. So under created object, you'll do df bed, well, df craft bed, sorry. It will be your MISC object that we created just. The object count will be 1. The workbench keyword, if you remember, is that keyword that we created that is going to do a link to the object itself. And we've got the required items list. So let's say firewood. And also build your own home material nails. You can of course use the object window and search for all the materials and stuff if you don't know the IDs for things. Obviously I've been doing this a while, I know what all the IDs are. I'm going to do 3 firewood, and remember that nails include 10 nails in each one, so let's just do 1 for that. So 1 big set of nails and firewood. And then the match condition, this is where you're going to want the object to disappear from the workbench as soon as it's been crafted. So what we're going to do is under the condition, alt click and new, and we're going to change this to just click into it and do get disabled. And then we want to ensure that in order to create something, it has to not exist yet, or it has to be initially disabled. So make sure that the value is 1, comparison is equals. Don't accidentally tick any of these things or change any of these values, otherwise you'll make a mess of things. And then we want to run it on a reference. Select, And in this case, the bed, we're going to select the bed reference, click OK, OK. And that is basically saying this constructible object will only appear on the workbench if the bed is initially disabled. So as soon as you enable that bed, you craft it, gone. It'll go from the workbench. Now, additional things that you could do here is you could also have another get disabled check. Maybe in order to craft the bed, something else has to already be there. So I'll do it on the bedside table. So let's go ahead and type in df. Let's go back into construct bed. I'm just going to make this a little bit quicker on myself. I'm going to make a constructible object for the bedside table as well. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to make a copy of it, go back in again. I don't want to mess with things that it loses. So I'm just going to confirm a new version first. Change it to the bedside table on the created object. Keep the majority of it the same. I'll tweak the firewood to only take 1 firewood and 1 set of nails. And then maybe even some, I don't know, iron fittings. And then change the disabled to, you guessed it, the bedside table's X marker, because we had everything linked to the marker in that instance. And then if I wanted to make sure that you can only craft a bedside table if you have a bed, I'm going to do get disabled. And this time the value is going to be 0. So it's going to be that the bed is there rather than not there in order for this to be crafted. And then I'm going to do my reference, select, and, the bed. So check that the bed is enabled and make sure that it's and, not or, is ticked. Otherwise, it's only going to check one of the conditions. So it makes sure that both those conditions are true. The bedside table is not there and the bed is. Otherwise, it's not going to show. And you'll see what happens shortly in game when that happens. So yeah, there we go. That's about it. Let's click OK on there. That's perfect. And if you remember, our misc object is supposed to have a constructible object on there. It's a bit of a mouthful. So if I go back into my bed, back into my properties, now that I've got a construct object, I can edit that, type in df and put bed on there, and then very quickly just do the same for my bedside table. So I'm going to fill that property in now that we've just created one to bedside table. And again, the other two we can sort of leave blank. And click save. So the other thing that you could do that I've done in my mod Riverside Shack, you could go opposite. So let's say you give somebody the opportunity to change the roofing to a thatched roof and it enables the thatched roof. Great. What if they did that and then they decided, I don't want the thatched roof, I don't like it? You could do a deconstruct object, and what you'd do is rather than the enable chain, you'd do a disable chain, so opposite to whatever you enabled, and then you could have your condition flipped, so get disabled 0, so that the thatched roof is enabled, and then it would get rid of it. So you just do this sort of in reverse. So that's just something else that you could sort of do. Now, obviously, we're going to go in game in a moment, but before we do that, we're going to need the items to test that this works. Now, obviously, you don't want to just put a chest in the house. I'm going to do that because it's going to be easier. In fact, I'm going to do it outside the house. You don't really want to just give the player all of the items, otherwise they might as well not be crafting. Oh, if you get this, by the way, just hit F5 and it'll refresh the cell and make sure that everything appears. Sometimes the landscape and the buildings will disappear when you come back into an exterior cell. Extra little tip there. Obviously, I'm just going to put a chest here that I can activate, or in fact, I'll just do a barrel that has all the items that we need for testing. But you may well want to use it for testing and make sure you remove it before you release the mod. Otherwise, somebody's just going to find it and grab all the crap and then just craft everything immediately. Entirely up to you, but I'm just going to go ahead, grab myself a barrel. I'm going to make a new version of it, and this is going to allow me to test everything. So I'm just going to do test barrel again with the uppercase. Stuff. There we go. And in here, I'm going to put what was firewood. I'll put about 5 in just to cover myself. I will put build your own home material, and it was iron fittings. and also some nails. So I'll put 3 nails in as well. And obviously what's going to happen is you're probably going to fill this with a ton of stuff that you need to use for the house to do all of your testing. And then you're going to hide the barrel away somewhere that you know where it is that you can activate, or you're going to delete it afterwards. And you'll probably want to activate God mode, so I'll show you that when we go in game, just to make sure that this stuff doesn't over encumber you and then you can't test. But that's what I'm going to do there. I'm going to create a new form. Just double check, because I didn't confirm it first and then I made changes. In this case with containers, I think it's fine. Yeah, my stuff's still there, that's good. And I'm essentially going to delete that barrel. I'm going to replace it with this one, just so it's got all of our testing materials. And that should be good. And there we go, that should have our system all set up, ready to go. So I'm going to dive in game, check this out, and then you can kind of expand upon it from there. Okay, so here we are in game, and as you can see, we've got our workbench outside. I'm just going to hop onto that first and take a little look. And as you can see, we've got our bed, but because we placed a condition on the bedside table to require the bed, that's not there. The bed is also rotated, not too bad. We'd like to see it rotate a little like that, but that's perfectly fine. That's passable. And we don't have the objects, so I'm just going to have to turn to my side here and loot this barrel. I've got my objects there. I can toggle God mode, so TGM, and then just go back over to the workbench, and I could craft that. I'm just going to go inside first and show you how the bed's not actually there. You'll have to forgive any lag because this is running on a mini PC, so it's all on like high settings. I might need to tweak that down, but you'll see that the bed's not there. Got a couple of other things that are enabled, that's fine, but the bed's gone, it's not there. So I'm just going to go back out and turn around, and we're going to craft the bed. And you'll see, do you want to create this item? That's pretty standard, but then what we also get is this item will take 3 hours to craft. And if you'll see that we don't have the items anymore, it's just taken them off us just prior to crafting. If I said leave, it's actually used an SKC function to pull those items back based on what's in the constructible object, which is really cool. And that means that we can go, oh, hang on, actually, yeah, I do. And you'll see it's also replaced 3. We didn't put that in the message box, but we did put that in the property. So it's replaced with the number that we stated, and we can do craft. Get a nice little fade, and then our bedside table has immediately shown up. Depending on how many objects are being enabled and disabled, you may find that it might take a few seconds just to update if you've done an insane amount of stuff, or depending on your rig. But the bedside table is now there. I'm going to go ahead and do both. I'm going to craft, and that one said 2 hours because we changed the number on the property. And we're going to go back in. And as if by magic, there are our items, and I've got my leveled items there as well that have been created, which is perfect. The lights there, everything. Fantastic. There we go. If you would like to know how this script works, then stay with me, and we're going to go ahead now, dive back into the creation kit, into Sublime Text. I'm going to take a little look at exactly how this script works in the background. Okay, so here we are in Sublime Text. I've got a good video on this if you want to know how to get your own Sublime Text set up with the Papyrus scripting for Skyrim. I'll put that at the top there. But all we've got to do here is essentially take a look at this script. It's actually quite short for what it does. It has been cut down immensely from the old versions of the script. It utilizes some wild loops, very simple concept really. And I'll explain it the best I can in basic terms, essentially. So you've got all of your properties here. As you can see, the only reason this is kind of taking up as many lines as it is mainly the tooltips. So you've got your constructible object that it uses to essentially give you the items back if you decide not to craft something. It's got the job time, which is not only the number used to increase the game hour, but it's also the number used to double up and be placed into the message that we've seen. The game hour, again, for the game hour time, it's the global that the game uses. We also have player items, so as it says, these are items that you can add. So like I mentioned previously, if you wanted to add a key or anything like that, so it's a leveled list with a bunch of items We've also got the message craft, which we're going to do that with. And I'm literally just going to change it here because we noticed that earlier on. So there we go. So we've got DF message craft. In fact, it shouldn't be DF. It should just be message craft, because we shouldn't have anything on there. It's meant to be quite generic. And then I'm just going to go ahead and save it. There we go. Just compile that. So again, the craft message itself, the craft item, so it's itself. Using self doesn't seem to want to work for some reason. Not sure why. But player ref, obviously it's just a reference for the player to add things, remove things, whatever you need to do. And then we've got the two arrays, which are for enabling a bunch of stuff and disabling a bunch of stuff, making it very easy to just put them in there, job done. So we've got the event on container change, just like the old system. Essentially, this event triggers when the object changes container, so whether it's just been created and added to the player or whatever might happen, this essentially goes down. iButton messagecraft.show, and what you do with the .show is you mention the job time. So this is the part in the brackets that replaces the number on the message box that you're asking to show. So you can have a total of about 10 to 15, something like that, that you can actually swap out if you wanted to. So you would actually end up adding additional job times, stating them up top there, and you can actually do loads of replacements. You can see here, oops, excuse me. You can see here it's got AF-arg 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think it's 9 actually. It's a maximum of 9 values that you can actually swap out in a message, which is quite useful. So if the button is 0 or if the button is 1, so it's just checking what button you've selected, whether you want to craft it or not. If you do yes, we get the quick fade out. We get job time used to modify the game hour. So I used to do a whole get and then set time. All you have to do is .mod. And then you've got enable all, disable all, which are two separate functions that are called down the bottom that we'll look at in a moment. And then we've got the adding of any items and then the removing of the craft item itself. Now, the false and true here are if you have a notification showing at the top of the screen for key was added or this was removed. Obviously, we want to silently remove the craft item, but we want the player to know when a key's been added. They'll get the little sound for the object going into inventory, which is just standard game function. And then you'll see the notification because we've said false, which is basically don't do it secretively. So if you don't want the object crafted, and because you've seen how long it's going to take, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to run out of food if you've got a needs mod or something like that, then what it does is it just states an integer that it creates on the fly, and it basically goes to the construction object that you've stated and it gets the number of ingredients. This is an SKSE function, so again you'll need SKSE, and it does -1 to account for the fact that arrays start at 0 and go on from there. So if you're actually trying to get number 1 in the list, you have to go to 1 but minus off 1 because 1 is 0, so on and so forth. It's basically that little offset that you get. And while I is -1, which it will continue to increase every time it zips through the while loop, so it's just going to run through and keep checking and checking and checking and checking each item, and it's just going to add the construction object back, and just when it hits the end of the list, it's done. So it's just basically a run through of everything in a constructible object, and to make sure you get all the stuff back and get the specific count of each thing back. And then you remove the craft item again, because either way, if you're crafting it or deciding not to craft it, the trigger item, the misc object, needs to be removed. And then return, I think that's just a failsafe. I don't think that's really needed, but it's there anyway, just to make sure the script gets cut off after the while loop, but it shouldn't really be needed. So those two functions where you basically enable everything or you disable everything, and all it is it states an integer, and it does the same for both of them pretty much, just with disable rather than enable. And there's an interesting part to this which I'll explain. So enable chain.getLength. So the amount of items is the length in your enable chain array, and it will just go again while you're on the objects count, the length. You'll just keep increasing it until you hit the limit of how many items are in there, and then it will stop out the while loop, and for each item it will enable it. Now what I've used in the past is just straight up enable, which is great, but what I found is if you're running through a while loop and an array trying to enable this, enable this, enable this, enable this, you need to ensure that it doesn't wait until it's done them all before it updates the menu. So what was happening with just enable, where I've got enable no wait here instead, what was happening with just enable is that it would go, okay, I'm going to enable this, 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 and then I'm going to update the game's sort of states of checking if it's there. And what would happen is in the craft menu, you would craft something. So you would craft a bed, and the bed would still be there on the craft menu until you came out the menu and back in. And the only way to fix it was to use enable no wait. So it's do your thing for that, and then update the game, and then do the thing for the next one, update the game, do the thing for the next one, tell the game it's updated. That's the way it needed to be done. And it'll do the same for disable. So really, really interesting, that function, disable no wait. It's basically a cut out the crap, let's get updated, let's do everything in one go real super quick. And that's pretty much the script. It's relatively simple. You can expand on it, something that I've done in Riverside Shack, for example. Like I said earlier, I've done like a deconstruct using this and just flipping everything around. Not in the script, just in the properties and whatnot, and the settings in CK. Another thing that I've done is allow recycle objects. So it will also have an additional leveled item list for things that can be added to the player or to a container. Recycled stuff from if you break down a house. So if you deconstruct something, you could add an extra leveled item list of stuff that you get back. So it costs you 10 firewood to make something, but then you destroy it after, you get maybe 5 back because you won't get the same amount of material back, but you'll get a bit of wood back, and then you could recycle that for something else. And rather than put that on the player and weigh them down, it could put it into a container. So you'd put an object reference for a container that would go in. That's something I've done in Riverside Shack. You could expand it out for something like Mershcombe Estate, one of my other player homes, where you can actually have requirements for skill level for different things and do different things dependent on the skill level. Which is really cool. So it's super modular, it's super open for editing, and like I say, if you do use it, drop me some credit, but I'm not going to chase you if you don't. I'm not really fussed. Just create cool shit. That's about it. But there we go. That is pretty much how the script functions in the back end, and this will be available in the description on my website in a whole resource section on my Google Drive. And that is just about it for another Skyrim Creation Kit tutorial video, so I hope you found it useful. Please let me know in the comments section down below. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already to catch more videos in the future, including that Nifscope one, where I'll go through and show you how you get objects to display better in your craft menus and whatnot. And I've left something on screen, by the way. Let me know if you can see it. It seems a bit out of place, so let me know in the comments if you can find out what that is as well, see who gets it first. Please do check out my website, of course, at www.darkfox127.co.uk for a lot more stuff on there, for my mods, for my videos, for other content and whatnot, and resources especially. Otherwise, that is just about it. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will speak to you all next time.